The radiator clicked twice and gave up. Ethan Cole pressed his palm flat against the metal. Cold. The kind of cold that had been there for days, settled in like an old tenant who'd stopped paying rent but refused to leave. He pulled his hand back and looked at the window. Ice had crept up the corners of the glass from the outside, thin white fingers reaching in. He was still in his work clothes, gray cargo pants, a jacket with a frayed left cuff. He'd come home from the overnight shift at 6 a.m., slept 4 hours on the couch because the bedroom mattress had a spring pushing through the fabric on the left side, and now it was nearly midnight again, and he hadn't eaten since a granola bar at noon. The apartment was a single room plus a kitchenette. The walls were the color of old teeth. A sleeping bag had been folded into a makeshift cushion on the floor beside the couch, and in it, under 2 thin blankets and a winter coat that had been turned into a quilt, his daughter Lily was asleep. She was 7 years old. She had her mother's nose and her mother's stubborn way of pressing her lips together when she was thinking hard about something. She'd been asleep for 2 hours. She'd asked him, before she closed her eyes, if they could have pancakes in the morning. He'd said yes without thinking. He had $11 in his checking account. He looked at the tins on the shelf above the kitchenette. 1 can of chickpeas. Half a box of crackers that had been open for 6 days. A jar of peanut butter, scraped down to the last ring of brown film. That was it. The refrigerator had stopped working well enough to keep anything cold, so there was nothing in it except a bottle of ketchup and a baking soda box that had been there since before he moved in. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch and rested his forearms on his knees. The overhead light buzzed faintly. The electric bill was 3 weeks past due. He'd been paying it in partial amounts, calling ahead to explain, listening to the automated system repeat back his account number in a cheerful voice. The gas had been shut off 11 days ago. That was the radiator. That was why Lily slept in her coat. He pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked across the lower left corner, a fracture he'd been ignoring for 4 months because the phone still worked if you tilted it slightly. He opened his contacts. Marcus, he scrolled to the name. Marcus Webb, his oldest friend from college. The only person he still had in his phone who might, without too much pain, lend him $50. Marcus had called twice in the last month. Ethan hadn't called back, not because of anything Marcus had done, but because every conversation eventually circled around to the question of how things were going, and Ethan was tired of the answer. He looked at Lily on the floor. Her cheek was pressed against the edge of the coat blanket. Her breathing was slow and even. She had asked him 2 days ago, very quietly, not looking at him, whether they could maybe go somewhere warmer soon. She hadn't said it like a complaint. She'd said it like a practical observation from someone who had learned that complaints didn't change things. That was the part that undid him. Not her hunger, not the cold. The way she had stopped expecting things to get better and had simply begun adjusting herself to things as they were. He tapped Marcus's name. His thumb moved to the message field. He began typing. Hey man. I know it's been a while. And I'm sorry about that. I hate asking this. Is there any chance you could lend me $50? Lily hasn't eaten a real meal today, and I'm short until Thursday. He read it back. His jaw tightened. He deleted the last sentence and replaced it with, just until payday. He read it again. He pressed send. He stared at the screen. 3 seconds. 10, 20. The message sat there with a single gray check mark. Not delivered. He checked the signal bar. 1 dot. Sometimes calls worked, sometimes they didn't. He moved to the window and held the phone up. Still 1 dot. Sometimes texts still went through on 1 dot. Sometimes they didn't. He put the phone face down on the couch cushion and pressed his hands together between his knees. He thought about the job interview he'd had 2 weeks ago. A project management role at a mid-sized construction firm. He'd worn his one decent shirt and borrowed a tie from the man 2 doors down. He'd done well, he thought. He'd answered every question clearly. The interviewer had shaken his hand firmly at the end and said they'd be in touch. They had not been in touch. He thought about the engineering license that was still technically valid for another 8 months. He thought about the company he had started 5 years ago with 2 other men, Daniel and Marcus Farrow. No relation to his friend Marcus, a small infrastructure consulting firm called Halcyon Systems. He thought about the 18 months it had taken to build to 11 clients, and a small but real reputation. Late nights at a second-hand desk in a rented office, learning the specific rhythms of building something from the bones. He had been good at it. Not good in the way that is flattering and vague, but good in the specific way. He could walk into a legacy infrastructure system and read it like a person reads a room. The load-bearing walls, the hairline cracks, the places where someone had made a smart decision, and the places where someone had made a convenient one. He thought about the moment he had discovered that Daniel Farrow had been double-billing clients under a shell company, and that because Ethan's name was on the original contracts, the fallout had landed on him with full weight. Lawsuits, settlements, license investigations that were eventually cleared but not before the damage was done. Every client gone. The office lease broken. The savings account zeroed. His ex-wife had left 8 months after Halcyon collapsed. She hadn't left because of the money, she'd said. She'd left because the man she'd married had disappeared, and she didn't know the person sitting in his place. He thought that was probably true. He had spent so long holding the weight of it that he had become the weight. That was the only way he knew to describe it. Lily had stayed with him. That had been the one thing that went his way. The phone buzzed. He picked it up quickly. A single message from an unknown number. "Where are you?" He stared at it. The number wasn't Marcus's. The area code was the same city, but the last 4 digits were wrong. He'd misdialed, or mistapped. The cracked screen had misfired the number by a digit somewhere, sent his message to a stranger. He felt heat crawl up the back of his neck. The kind of heat that wasn't warmth. He almost typed back, "Sorry, wrong number." Then he heard Lily shift in her sleep, a small sound like a question. He set the phone down again. Then he picked it back up. "I'm sorry." He typed to the unknown number. "I sent that to the wrong person. Please ignore it." He hit send. He set the phone face down again. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. He didn't pick it up for a full minute. When he did, the message read, "I didn't ignore it." "Where are you?" Victoria Hale did not consider herself a sentimental person. She had made peace with that description a long time ago, sometime around age 24, when she had realized that the people who called her cold were usually people who wanted something from her that she wasn't willing to give. She was not cold. She was precise. There was a difference, and most people couldn't see it. She was 38 years old. She had built Meridian Group from a 7-person fintech startup into a company with 460 employees and a valuation that made financial journalists use words like meteoric and unprecedented. She had done this in 11 years. She had done it without a co-founder, without a mentor in the traditional sense, and without ever once pretending to be something she was not. Tonight, she was in the back seat of a black Cadillac moving through downtown traffic toward a hotel, where she was supposed to review a merger document before a 7 a.m. call with the London team. Her laptop was open on the seat beside her. The document was 43 pages long. She'd read 21 of them. Her phone was in her left hand, because it always was. She kept her personal number separate from her public number. Different SIM cards, different device, different everything. Very few people had the personal number. Her assistant did not have it. Her board of directors did not have it. The message came in at 11:51 p.m. She read it once, then she read it again. It was from a number she didn't recognize. The message was short and clearly not intended for her. A man asking a friend for $50. A daughter who hadn't eaten. Her first thought was, "This is a scam." Her second thought was, "Scams don't apologize." The follow-up message had come in 7 seconds after the first. An immediate retraction, embarrassed, asking her to ignore it. She'd seen the timestamp on both messages sitting side by side. Nobody running a scam apologized this quickly. Nobody running a scam corrected course before they'd even had time to see if the first message would land. She looked out the window for a moment. The streetlights moved past in sequence. She typed, "I didn't ignore it. Where are you?" She sent it before she had fully decided to send it. The reply took 4 minutes. She almost thought it wasn't coming. Then, "Please don't worry about it. I'll figure something out. Sorry again for bothering you." She had spent her career reading people through the things they chose not to say. The message had the exact texture of someone who was too proud to ask twice and too exhausted to be convincing about being fine. She typed, "You're not bothering me. I'm asking where you are." Another long pause, 3 minutes this time. Then an address came through. A street in the Millbrook district. She knew Millbrook. She had grown up 9 blocks from there. She looked at the address for a moment. Then she said to her driver, "Change of plans, Robert. Turn the car around." Robert was 61 years old and had been driving her for 4 years. He did not ask questions when she changed plans. He checked the mirror, signaled, and turned. She closed the merger document on her laptop. The London call could wait until morning. She had been telling herself things could not wait for long enough, that she had forgotten it was sometimes a choice rather than a fact. Tonight, she chose. She thought about being 9 years old, in a 2-room apartment with her mother, who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't always make the math work. She thought about a particular night in December when she was 11, when there had been nothing in the house except dry pasta, and the pasta had been eaten already, and her mother had made it anyway, and put a little butter on it, and said, "This is a very Italian dinner," in a cheerful voice that only barely held together. Young Victoria had eaten it, and said nothing because she was old enough to understand the effort behind the voice, and had not wanted to cost her mother that effort. She thought about how silence had felt in those rooms. Not the silence of peace. The silence of a person trying to hold themselves very still so the bad thing wouldn't find them. She knew that silence. She had been fluent in it before she knew the word for it. She had built Meridian, in some ways, in direct opposition to those silences. Every system she had designed, the way compensation was structured, the transparent criteria for promotion, the clear reporting lines had been built with the memory of precarity sitting behind it. Not sentimentally, practically, she knew what it felt like when the ground was uncertain. And she had designed a company where it wasn't, because she believed people did their best work when they were not secretly terrified. And still, there were the people who fell through the gaps before they reached any structure she had built. The people with professional histories and cracked phone screens and children asleep in cold rooms. She could not reach all of them. She had made peace with that. But this one had asked for help at 11:51 p.m. and then immediately, reflexively, apologized for asking. There was something in that specific texture, the hunger and the dignity intact, regardless that she could not drive past. She looked out the window and watched the city pass, and did not reconsider. Ethan had sent the address because he couldn't explain to himself why he hadn't. He'd stared at his phone for 3 minutes trying to construct a sentence that would politely end the exchange, and he hadn't been able to finish one. The stranger, whoever they were, had responded with a directness that didn't feel threatening. It felt like someone who was used to cutting through the middle of things. He was standing at the window when the car arrived. He heard it before he saw it. A near-silent engine and tires that barely registered on the wet asphalt. Then headlights swept across the lower half of the building. And he looked down and saw it. A black Cadillac pulling to the curb with a smoothness that didn't belong on this street. He didn't move. The driver got out first. An older man in a dark jacket who walked to the rear passenger door and opened it. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a charcoal coat that had clearly not been bought at a department store. Her hair was dark, pulled back in a way that was functional rather than styled. She looked up at the building with an expression that gave away nothing at all. Ethan thought, "I have made a serious mistake." He backed away from the window. Then he thought about Lily asleep on the floor. And he stopped, backing away. He went to the door and opened it before she reached his landing. He could hear her footsteps on the stairs, measured and unhurried. Not the quick footsteps of someone uncomfortable in a strange building. Not the slow, careful ones of someone afraid. Just steps. The footsteps of a person who moved through unfamiliar environments, as though they had agreed in advance to simply deal with whatever was in them. When she appeared at the top of the stairwell, she looked at him without surprise, as if she had expected to find exactly this and had prepared accordingly. "Ethan," she said. He hadn't given her his name. She must have found it from the address, or some other way he didn't want to think about too hard. "Yes," he said. She held 2 paper bags in one hand. He hadn't noticed them until now. "I stopped at a 24-hour place," she said. "I didn't know what your daughter liked, so I got a few things." He looked at the bags. He looked at her. He looked at the bags again. "I can't," he started. "I know," she said. "You didn't ask. I'm not giving you anything you asked for." She said it without drama, as if it were simply a categorization of facts. "I'm giving your daughter breakfast food." "That's different." He stood in the doorway for another moment. Behind him, he heard Lily shift and make a small sound. He stepped back. She came in quietly. He watched her take in the room, the couch, the sleeping bag on the floor, the bare shelf with its 3 items, the dark radiator, the cracked window with the ice on its edges. She didn't react. Not a flinch, not a tightening around the eyes. Nothing that could be read as pity. He appreciated that in a way he couldn't have articulated. She set the bags on the kitchen counter, without asking where he wanted them. Lily had woken up. She was sitting up on the sleeping bag with the coat blanket around her shoulders, looking at the woman with the careful attention of a child who has learned to take inventory before committing to a feeling. The woman crouched down to Lily's level. She did it naturally, without the exaggerated softness some adults put on around children. "Hi," she said. "I'm Victoria. I'm a friend of your dad's." Lily looked at Ethan. He nodded slightly. "Hi," Lily said. Then, after a pause, "Are you cold?" Victoria looked at the radiator. "A little," she said honestly. "How about you?" "I'm used to it," Lily said. Something moved across Victoria's face. It was quick, and then it was gone. "That's tough," she said simply. Not, "Oh, you poor thing." Not, "We'll fix that right away." Just, "That's tough," said like she meant it. Lily seemed to decide something. "Do you want to sit down?" she said. "Sure," Victoria said. Ethan watched a billionaire sit cross-legged on his floor next to his 7-year-old daughter, and he didn't know what to do with any of it. She stayed for an hour and 20 minutes. They ate at the small table that could seat 2 people comfortably and 3 people uncomfortably. Victoria had brought eggs, bread, a small container of orange juice, a bag of apples, a block of cheese, 2 cans of soup, and a box of the kind of cereal that had a cartoon on the front. Lily had looked at the cereal box for a long moment with an expression of intense seriousness before placing it on the shelf with the careful reverence of someone storing something valuable. They talked while Ethan made scrambled eggs on the small electric burner that still worked. Not about anything large. Lily talked about a book she was reading, a library book about deep-sea creatures, and Victoria listened in the way some adults do, where you can tell they're actually interested rather than performing interest. She asked Lily which creature she thought was the strangest, and Lily said the barrel-eye fish, because it had transparent fluid in its head, and its eyes pointed straight up through the fluid like periscopes. "That's a good answer," Victoria said. "What would your answer be?" Lily asked. Victoria thought for a moment. "The mantis shrimp. It can punch with the speed of a bullet." Lily's eyes went wide. "That's allowed?" Apparently, Ethan set the eggs on the table and watched his daughter eat with the particular concentration of someone who was genuinely hungry. Not performing hunger, and the tightness in his chest that had been his constant companion for 8 months shifted slightly, like a knot that has been pulled in one direction for so long it has forgotten there are other directions. After Lily was fed and starting to droop again, Ethan settled her back into the sleeping bag. He tucked the coat blanket around her shoulders, and she grabbed his hand once, briefly, and then let go. He came back to the table. Victoria was looking at the wall. Not at anything on it, just at the space. "You didn't have to come here," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm going to pay you back the sect. Don't." Her voice was calm, not cutting. "Please just don't say that." "It's groceries." He was quiet. He folded his hands on the table. "The address you gave me," she said. "Millbrook District." She paused. I grew up near here. He looked at her. In the overheard light, she looked different than she had in the stairwell. Less like someone who had stepped out of a different world, and more like someone who had once stepped out of one exactly like this. You don't have to tell me anything, she said. But I'm going to ask one question, and you can tell me to leave if you want. Okay, he said. You mentioned in the message that you used to have a different kind of life. The phrasing was, she stopped. You weren't asking for help as someone who had always needed it. You were asking as someone who wasn't used to needing it. He didn't answer right away. The electric burner was still ticking softly as it cooled. I had a company, he said. Infrastructure consulting. A good one. He told her the rest of it in the way he had learned to tell it. Without bitterness. Just the sequence of events. The partner, the billing fraud, the legal cascade, the clients, the savings, his ex-wife leaving, which he understood. He didn't mention the exact name of the company. He was too tired. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. What was the company called? She said. He looked at her. Why? Her expression was unreadable. Curiosity. Halcyon Systems, he said. She was very still. What? He said. Nothing, she said. But the word came out with a slight delay, a quarter second off the beat. I'm sorry that happened to you. She left 10 minutes later. She shook his hand at the door. Not a social handshake. A real one. Firm and brief. On her way out, she set a business card on the kitchen counter. He didn't look at it until she was gone. The card was heavy stock, cream-colored, with a single embossed line of text beneath the name, Victoria Hale, Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Group. He sat with it for a long time. He had heard of Meridian Group. Everyone in tech-adjacent industries had heard of Meridian Group. They'd started in fintech, expanded into infrastructure software, and in the last 4 years had acquired several smaller companies in the systems integration space. He knew the name Victoria Hale the way you knew names you'd read in business coverage without ever expecting to encounter them in person. He turned the card over. On the back, in pen, a phone number. Different from the one he'd messaged by accident. This one had been written for him specifically. He set the card on the kitchen counter and went to the window. The street was empty. The car was gone. He thought about the way she'd gone still when he said the name of his company. The quarter-second delay before she recovered. He was an engineer by training, but he'd spent enough years working with people to know that tells were real, and that had been one. He picked up the card again, turned it over. The pen marks were clean and slightly angular. Someone who wrote quickly and precisely. He thought about Lily asking if they could have pancakes in the morning. He thought about the engineering license he still had for 8 months. He thought about Daniel Farrow, who had taken everything and kept walking, and about the shell company that had absorbed Halcyon's client contracts after the settlement. He'd never looked too closely at the shell company. Lawyers had told him not to. It had hurt too much. He opened his laptop, old, slow, the fan running constantly, and searched. Halcyon Systems. Acquisition. 2021 infrastructure. The results came up in 3 seconds. He read the first one. Then he read it again. The shell company that had absorbed Halcyon Systems client contracts was called Vantage Infrastructure Partners. In 2022, Vantage Infrastructure Partners had been acquired by Meridian Group. The work he had built. The 11 clients. The systems architecture. The documentation. The proprietary frameworks he had spent 4 years developing. All of it now sat inside the company of the woman who had just fed his daughter scrambled eggs and sat cross-legged on his floor, asking about mantis shrimp. He stared at the screen. He thought about coincidence. He thought about the 1 digit in the phone number. He thought about her going still at the name. She'd known who he was. He picked up the card. Dua 3 times. I am. He dialed the number on the back. She answered on the second ring. I thought you might call, she said. You knew, he said. Not an accusation. Just the fact. I did. She didn't try to soften it. Not before tonight. I recognized the name of the company. I put the rest together while I was sitting at your table. You own my work, he said. The frameworks I built, the client systems. Meridian owns assets that were legally transferred to Vantage, and then to us, she said. I know that's a technical distinction. It's not a technical distinction to me. No, she said. I know it isn't. A pause. I'm not calling what Pharaoh did to you anything other than what it was. He stole from you. The legal outcome was unjust. He held the phone and looked at the card. Why did you come tonight? He said. I told you. The message. You could have sent a delivery. You could have sent cash. You could have done anything else. He kept his voice low because Lily was asleep. You came yourself. A longer pause this time. I've known your name for 2 years, Victoria said. Not personally. Professionally. When Meridian did the due diligence on the Vantage acquisition, I read the background on the Halcyon assets. The technical documentation was, she seemed to stop herself. It was excellent work. The kind you don't see often. I asked my team about the original architect. They told me what had happened, and I've been trying to find you since then, she said. Not another pause, different in quality. Not for any sentimental reason. For a professional one. We've been building out an infrastructure division, and we needed someone who understood legacy systems integration at the level your documentation showed. I had my people looking. We couldn't find you. I fell off the map, he said. You did. He thought about the 1-digit difference in the phone number. He thought about whether things like this happened, or whether he was constructing meaning from sequence. What do you want from me? He said. To offer you a job, she said. A real one. Not charity. A position that pays what the work is worth. With full transparency about how we got here, and what we're offering, and why. Another pause. I want to be clear. I didn't come tonight because of the job. I came because the message was real, and your daughter was hungry. Those are separate things. I need you to understand that the offer doesn't cancel out the debt we owe you for the Vantage acquisition. Those are also separate. I'm not offering you work as a way to make that even. That can't be made even. I'm offering you work because you're one of the better architects I've seen on paper, and I have a team that needs what you know. He looked at Lily in the sleeping bag. Her breathing was steady and slow. She had, when he'd tucked her back in, smelled faintly of orange juice. I need to think, he said. I know you do, Victoria said. Take the time you need. I need to know one thing first, he said. Ask, is the offer real? Not a gesture. Not you covering something uncomfortable by wrapping it in a professional transaction. A real job, real stakes, real evaluation. Yes, she said. And if you come in and the work isn't there, I'll tell you that directly, and we'll find something else. I don't do gestures. He believed her. He didn't fully understand why, but he did. I'll call you in the morning, he said. Okay, she said. He sat in the dark for another hour after they hung up, not deciding, just sitting with the weight of it, the strangeness of it, the way the world had narrowed to this room for 8 months and was now, possibly, suggesting that it was larger. He slept for 3 hours. When he woke, Lily was already awake. She was sitting on the floor with the deep-sea creatures book open in her lap, and the cereal box was on the table next to a bowl she'd found herself and rinsed out at the sink. She looked up when he sat up. Is there milk? She asked. Dry cereal today, he said. Or I can make toast. She looked at the cereal box. Dry is fine, she said, with the equanimity of someone who has recalibrated expectations. He made them both toast anyway. He sat at the table while she ate and looked at the business card, which was still on the counter where he'd left it. Is she your friend? Lily asked. The lady from last night. I'm figuring that out, he said. Lily ate a piece of toast. She wasn't fake, she said. He looked at his daughter. Some adults are fake, Lily said, with the matter-of-fact authority of someone who has done research. When they talk to kids, they do a different voice. She didn't do a different voice. No, he said. She didn't. She knew about the mantis shrimp. She did. Lily seemed to consider this sufficient. She went back to her toast. He called Marcus Webb first, the friend he'd been trying to reach the night before. He told Marcus a version of the previous 12 hours, abbreviated, and Marcus was quiet for a long moment before saying, "Man, are you serious right now?" And Ethan said yes, and Marcus said, "So what are you going to do?" And Ethan said, "I'm going to go in and see if I still know how to do my job." And Marcus said, "You've always known how to do your job." That was never the problem. He called Victoria at 9 a.m. "I want to come in," he said. "Not for the job. Not yet. I want to see the work. What you have. What the gaps are. I want to understand what I'd actually be walking into before I say yes to anything." "That's the right approach," she said. "And I need to bring Lily. I don't have childcare for today." A pausa. A brief one. "There's a conference room," she said. "She can have it. We'll get some things for her." "You don't need to." "I know," she said. "We'll see you at 11. The Meridian Group building was in the financial district. 42 floors. Clean glass, nothing showy. The lobby had the quiet confidence of a company that no longer needed to impress. Ethan wore his best clothes, which weren't his best clothes. He'd washed the good shirt last night and let it dry over the bathroom towel rack. He'd polished the shoes with a damp cloth. He'd told Lily to wear her school sweater, and she'd asked why, and he'd said because they were going to an important place, and she'd said okay and worn it without complaint. The reception desk called ahead. A woman named Rachel came down to meet them. She was in her 30s, with the organized but warm energy of someone who had been hired because they were good with people in general. She brought Lily to a conference room on the 3rd floor that had a window view of a courtyard garden and a stack of illustrated books that had appeared since the morning. Lily looked at the books. She looked at Rachel. "Did you get these today?" she said. "We did," Rachel said. Lily thought about this. "For me? For you." "Okay," Lily said, and sat down and opened the top one. Ethan went upstairs. The infrastructure team occupied half of the 9th floor. Open plan, standing desks, a cluster of monitors showing system dashboards in greens and yellows, and the occasional red that someone was already fixing. Victoria met him at the elevator. She was in work clothes, now dark blazer, minimal jewelry, and she looked at him the same way she had the night before. Direct, no warm-up. "Ready?" she said. "Let's see what you have," he said. She took him to a workstation and pulled up the system overview. She gave him 30 minutes with it. He didn't say anything for the first 25. He moved through the architecture documentation, followed the integration paths, found the seams where different acquisitions had been stitched together. On minute 27, he found it. "This handoff layer," he said, pointing, "between the Vantage legacy stack and your current API. Something's wrong here." 2 engineers near the workstation glanced at each other. "That's been causing latency issues for 8 weeks, one of them said. A man named Patrick, mid-30s, technically careful. "We've been trying to isolate it. It's not a performance issue," Ethan said. He pulled up the relevant code. "It's a state management problem. The session tokens from the legacy system aren't being invalidated correctly when they cross the handoff layer. You're accumulating orphan sessions." He pointed to the specific lines. "It's subtle because it only manifests under certain load conditions, which is why you can't reproduce it consistently." Patrick leaned in, looked at the screen, looked at the lines Ethan was pointing to. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's it. It'll take maybe a day to patch properly," Ethan said. "Less if you have someone who knows the Vantage stack." "We don't really," Patrick said. "That's kind of the problem." Victoria had been standing at the edge of the room. She had not inserted herself into the conversation. She had watched. Now she walked over. "What do you think?" she said. Not to the room. To Ethan. He thought about the engineering license, about the 8 months, about Lily asking if they could go somewhere warmer. He thought about the work, the way it had felt to sit down with a real problem after months of nights going and mornings coming and the same walls every day. The particular satisfaction of it, he'd forgotten, somewhat. that he was good at this. Not arrogant about it, just good. "I think the work is real," he said. "And I think you need someone who knows the legacy architecture." "Yes," Victoria said. "I have conditions," he said. "Tell me. I want to see the full offer in writing before I sign anything. Compensation, scope, equity, if applicable. I'm not walking in on faith alone. Fair. I want to talk to Patrick and the team directly, not through management layers. If I'm going to fix what's here, I need real access. Also fair. And I need 2 weeks before I officially start. My daughter needs a stable environment. I need to sort out the apartment situation." Victoria looked at him. "We can advance the first month's salary against signing," she said. "If that would help with the 2 weeks." He held her gaze. "That's not a condition," he said. "That's you offering something." "It is," she said. "You don't have to take it." He thought about the cold radiator, about the coat blanket, about the way Lily had said "I'm used to it" to a stranger in the night. "I'll take it," he said. March came in gray and then lightened at the edges. Ethan moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a building with functioning heat. On the 3rd week of February, he'd taken the advance, found the place, paid the deposit, and spent a Saturday carrying boxes that were mostly books, Lily's. Primarily up 2 flights of stairs with Marcus Webb, who had come over from Newark and complained about every step and made them both laugh. Lily had a room with a window that faced a small park. She'd stood in the middle of it for a full minute on the first night, not saying anything, just looking at the space. Then she'd said, "This is mine? All yours," Ethan said. She'd nodded seriously, and then gone to find her deep-sea creatures book and put it on the shelf, which meant she'd decided. He started at Meridian the 3rd week of February, on a Tuesday. He went in quietly, without announcement. Patrick showed him around the infrastructure floor and introduced him to the team without ceremony, which was how Ethan preferred it. He sat at his workstation and started on the handoff layer problem he'd identified. And by Thursday, he'd written the patch and submitted it for review, and by Friday, it had been tested and deployed, and the latency issue that had been open for 8 weeks was closed. He didn't make a thing of it, neither did Victoria. The work itself was the thing that surprised him most. Not its difficulty, but the way it felt to return to it. He had worried, during the months in between, that he'd lost something, that the layoff and the legal fallout and the long string of nothing days had eroded something essential in him, some capacity for the focused attention that good engineering required. He had worried that when he finally sat down with a real problem, he would find a hollowed-out version of the skill he used to have. That did not happen. He sat down with the handoff layer, and the problem clarified around him the way problems did when the understanding was real and not performed. He didn't feel rusty. He felt the opposite, sharpened by constraint, by months of doing without the tools he was used to, by having to solve small logistical problems with almost nothing and finding workable answers each time. That discipline translated. Engineering was, at its core, the art of finding workable answers with the constraints you actually had, Patrick noticed. He didn't say anything directly. He was the kind of person who expressed appreciation through engagement rather than compliment, asking follow-up questions, pulling Ethan into problems he might otherwise have solved alone, but Ethan could see it in the way the team's posture shifted in the first 2 weeks. He was not an outsider being watched anymore. He was someone whose judgment was being used. He saw Victoria most days, briefly. She had a directness that didn't modulate, depending on whether she was talking to a board member or a junior developer, and he had come to understand that this was not coldness, it was consistency. She treated everyone with the same particular form of respect, which was, "Your time matters, I will not waste it." They ate lunch together twice in the first month, in the small kitchen on 9, standing up, eating sandwiches from the cart in the lobby. Conversations about the work primarily, occasionally about other things. She asked about Lily once, not repeatedly, which he appreciated, and he told her about the room with the window and the deep-sea creatures book. And she said, "Good," and meant it. He didn't ask her about the night in February. Not yet. Not directly. He'd thought about it, though. The 1 digit. The timing. The message finding her instead of Marcus. He was an engineer, and he believed in systems and in cause and effect. But he had also spent enough time in the world to know that sometimes the cause was so thin and strange that the word accident didn't quite cover it. On a Wednesday in March, at the end of the day, he stopped by her office. Her door was open. She was at her desk, reading. She looked up. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sit down," she said. He sat. He looked at her. "The phone number I sent the message to. 1 digit off from Marcus's number." She held his gaze. "Did you know Marcus Webb?" he said. Before this, a pause. "Not the defensive kind, the careful kind. We went to the same professional development program," she said. "In 2019. We've exchanged information. I don't know him well, so it's possible," he said, "that his number was in some database, that a data breach or a directory somewhere had his number adjacent to yours. Possible," she said, "or it's a coincidence. Also possible." He looked at her. "Which do you think it is?" She considered. She was not the kind of person who gave easy answers to real questions. "I think," she said, "that the conditions for the message reaching me existed because of connected things. Whether that constitutes meaning is a philosophical question I'm not going to answer." "That's a careful answer. It's the honest one," she said. He nodded. He stood up to go. "Ethan," she said. He turned. "For what it's worth," she said. "I was looking for you for 2 years. And the way I found you was a man trying to feed his daughter at midnight." She paused. "I don't know what that means either, but I don't think it means nothing." He stood in the doorway for a moment. "Good night, Victoria," he said. "Good night," she said. April. The park outside Lily's window had leaves on it now. Small, fresh green ones. The kind that looks slightly unreal against a gray sky, too bright, like the color is still deciding how much to commit. Lily was at school. She'd made 2 friends in the new neighborhood, a girl named Sophie and a boy named Owen, who lived in the building across the street and knocked on the door on Saturdays with the directness of children who haven't yet learned to be cautious about wanting company. Owen had a dog named Chester, a brown mix of several things, who waited on the sidewalk while Owen came up, and who Lily visited with the devoted attention of a person making a case to be trusted. Ethan ran in the mornings now. Not far. A mile, sometimes 2. It wasn't a plan exactly, more a habit that had attached itself to the fact that he was sleeping enough to wake early. He ran past the park and around the block and came back to make coffee. These were small things. He had learned, over the past year, that small things were actually large things viewed from a distance. The radiator that worked. The tins that weren't empty. The morning that had nothing wrong with it. These were not minor. These were the structure of a life. At Meridian, he was 3 months in. The infrastructure team had expanded by 2 people since he'd joined. People he'd interviewed himself. Which still felt slightly improbable. He was careful in those interviews. He looked for the thing he'd learned to look for, which was not confidence or credential, but the specific quality of how someone talked about problems they hadn't solved yet, whether they stayed precise or started to perform. Patrick had become a genuine colleague, someone who texted him at odd hours about architecture problems and didn't seem to mind when the responses came back quick and opinionated. They had, in the way of people who work well together, developed a shorthand, a particular phrase Patrick used when he wanted to push back without being confrontational, a particular rhythm Ethan used when he was thinking out loud versus when he'd already landed somewhere. These things were not planned. They emerged. The work was hard and real and consumed him, in the way that work consuming you is actually a good thing, the way it fills the architecture of a day so that the gaps where bad thoughts used to pool don't have as much room. He and Victoria had lunch 3 times in the past 2 weeks, not standing up anymore. Actual lunch, at the table in the corner of the kitchen, with a full 45 minutes and conversations that had begun to wander beyond the work. She'd told him about the apartment she'd grown up in, the 9 blocks from Millbrook, the particular smell of the hallway in winter, and the way she had decided at age 14 that she was going to build something that didn't smell like that, not out of shame, out of clarity. She had known what she wanted, and the want had been clean and specific. Not more, but better. And she understood those were different. He'd told her about Lily's mother, not bitterly, just accurately. Two people who had loved each other, and then found, after the collapse of everything else, that love was not itself sufficient. She had listened without offering resolution, which was the right thing to do. He had not told her any of this was more than lunch. He was aware that it was, and he was not ready to name it. And he sensed she was also aware that it was and was also not ready to name it. And they were both too precise for pretending otherwise, but also too careful for rushing. They were, both of them, people who had learned that moving carefully was not the same as moving slowly. It was moving with attention to what was actually there. One evening in April, he came in to find Lily at the kitchen table with a notebook open in front of her, writing something carefully. He looked over her shoulder. She was writing a list. At the top it said, "Things that are better now." Under it, in her careful second-grade printing, "My room, heat, apples, library close. Daddy not tired all the time. Victoria." He looked at the last item. "You put Victoria on the list," he said. Lily didn't look up. "She knows about the mantis shrimp," she said. "That counts." He stood there for a moment. He thought about December, the radiator, the coat blanket, the cracked screen with the one wrong digit. He thought about the particular texture of the kind of hope you don't let yourself feel until after it has already arrived. He thought, okay. He went to the counter and started making dinner. Outside, the park was still lit by the last of the afternoon, and the leaves were very green, and somewhere a car was moving slowly down the street with its windows cracked, music coming out, and the April air was cold, but not the bad kind of cold, not the kind you couldn't argue with, the kind you could walk through. Somewhere in February, at 11:51 p.m., a man with a cracked phone and $11 and a daughter asleep in a coat blanket sent a message to the wrong number. The wrong number turned out to be the right one. He never entirely figured out whether that was luck, or structure, or something in between. Neither did she. They decided it didn't matter.